Well done. Thank you, Paul. Uh, my name is Paul Gallant, and I'm very, very pleased to be here tonight. Thank you. And Paul, I wanted to just start off by saying thank you for the good work that you've done with parents and human beings in Fairfield County. You are a great resource for all of us. And we at Primary Recovery Services are a family systems approach. We take a family system approach to healing and to recovery. So resources like yours are very, very important. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks. Thank you, Paul.
Good. So good evening, everybody. I've got a couple of slides, I think 6, and I'm going to talk for a few, and then we'll have questions and all that good stuff. So here we go. Let's start here. Actually, the word intervention has, since the show, everyone thinks it's when you get together and yell at a drug addict for a few minutes. Really, the word means to change the course. And that is our goal when we work with families. We want to bring anything that looks like health, recovery, love, kindness to a family system. The two biggest things I'll say to you tonight are, one, this is all about love. This is not about conflict or confrontation. And two, that it is a process, meaning most of the time we get our person, our identified patient, into treatment the morning of the intervention. About 85% of the time, they get in the car with me and off to treatment. But it is certainly something that takes quite a while. So I will work with families for days, weeks, months, and even years in order to get their family member into treatment. In the meanwhile, I'm hopefully getting them to groups like Paul, Al-Anon, and those sorts of things. I get the question of when do you do an intervention, Paul? And the simple answer to that is when anyone in the family has had enough. Really, it's not about I'll use the term IP just to be very clear. Identified patient is in the intervention circles what we call the subject of the intervention. That's the IP. So the intervention has very little to do with the acuity of this person's illness in terms of, do we do it when he gets this bad or when he gets that bad? It has very little to do with the motivation or the readiness of that person. It has to do with the family saying, we can't live this way any longer. We must take action. I talk to a lot of families, and some of them are ready to do this process, which is a difficult process. Some of them are gathering information, and there are plenty of times that I say to a mom or a dad, let's try to get your daughter into counseling. I really don't think an intervention is called for at this point. So what I try to do is get a sense of, are there more than one family member that, or maybe 2, 3, 4, how many people are worried about this IP? I tell each family, we're really talking about 3 things with your loved one. We want to tell them how much you care about them. We want to tell them about your concerns, and we want to offer them a reasonable course of action, which in these cases usually means inpatient residential treatment. It's not family therapy, and I get that a lot. People say, oh gosh, I cannot confront my son's drug addiction. I drink too much myself. And I say, well, Lisa, this is not about your drinking. If your son James talks about your drinking, I'll say, James, thank you for bringing that up, and we'll talk about that next time. But today we're talking about you. So again, you don't need to be without sin to be part of this thing. I help I help the family when they decide to move forward with this. The first thing we do is we determine who should be part of this intervention team. Small is better. Family, usually. I get calls, people say, well, he has a best friend. What about his best friend from school? And I say, no, thanks. Because we don't know where that best friend's loyalty really lies. He may decide to say, James, your parents are planning an intervention. You better head off to Canada. So I like to stick with family. They have the most to lose. They've usually been impacted in a way that is painful to them. The second thing we do is we determine what is the desired outcome. Again, it's most of the time treatment. I help the family choose the treatment center based on the clinical needs of the identified patient and the resources available to the family. I generally give 3 or 4 choices, places that we have worked with over 37 years, that places that I would send my own son or daughter or wife to. And I ask the families to, call, for instance, Silver Hill and say, why should I send my 22-year-old alcoholic son to you, Silver Hill? And let them talk for a few minutes. Take some notes, and then we'll meet again tomorrow and figure out which one is probably the best one for you. We go into the meeting with a bed at that center, the one the parents or the family place that they've chosen. So we don't go in and say, get different. We don't go in and say, please go find a place. We go in with an answer in hand. All the person has to do is say yes. We've made all the arrangements. I have airline tickets if we're going out west, the whole deal. So that piece, and I have to tell, I don't have to, but I tell most families, listen, we do not receive kickbacks from any of these treatment centers. I get paid once. That's the ethical way to do this. I get paid by the family, not the treatment center. The next piece is, when are we going to do this? Let's pick a time, a date, and a place. Because this process is so very emotional and scary and difficult, structure is imperative. We ensure this structure by asking each member of the intervention team to write a letter following a specific format that we provide. And I'm going to share that format with you. The letter acts as the script on the morning of the intervention. So each person in that room will have a letter, and here's what they look like. The letter always starts with the I love you part. It's generally easy for most family members to say nice things about their person. You talk about times that they've been there, just things that make them special and different, and why you love them. So that's the piece. In the beginning, that's the first part. I sometimes have to edit these letters because moms will write like 2 pages of I love you and 1 sentence of I'm concerned. So we try to keep these letters to 1 page. The reason being, folks generally have a short attention span. Most people are not very pleased when we show up at their home, so they don't want to hear a very long letter. And we really want to get to the point. Point being, I love you, I'm really worried, and will you please accept our help? So the letter that each person writes and sends to me prior to our pre-intervention meeting, that happens We get the team together, we choose the treatment center, everyone writes the letters. Then we have a sit down in person or by Zoom prior to the intervention with the IP. That pre-intervention is designed to reduce people's anxiety, make sure that we're all pointed in the same direction. And sometimes in that pre, I will speak to someone I haven't spoken with yet on the team. Generally, I talk to most people before the pre-intervention, but let's say there's an uncle from Phoenix that shows up here in Connecticut for the meeting. We go around in the very beginning and I say, can each of you say a few words about why you're here? And people begin talking. And I say, can you tell me your greatest concern about your nephew, James? And when folks start comparing notes, a lot of heads are bobbing up and down. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I am very, very good at getting people to be quiet if they're going to confront me. I can attack, justify, explain, defend. I can do lots of things to get you to leave me alone. But when I'm faced with a bunch of people that love me, that have a leader and have a goal in mind, it makes it a little bit harder for me as the alcoholic to steamroll everyone. So the first part, again, is the I love you piece. The second part of their letter is, as I said, why are you here? I say to people, your second part of your letter is designed to answer the question, why are you doing this to me? Mom, what is this? Why are all these people here? Well, here's what happened. Just 3 days ago, son, you overdosed on heroin. You were at Greenwich Hospital for 24 hours. That's part of the reason. You've failed out of school. You crashed 2 cars already. I have money missing from my savings account. My card is missing. So all these things, these behaviorally specific examples of why are you doing this? A, B, C, maybe 2, 3, 4. And on the slide, we talk about what happened, when it happened, and how did you feel? I felt these different ways. Each letter ends the same way. It's a question, a simple question that can be answered by yes or no. And it generally sounds like, will you please go to inpatient treatment today? There's a fourth part. So we got the love, the concern, and the solution. There's a fourth part that sometimes comes into play. That part is the boundaries, or some people have consequences. Some people actually have leverage. It's referred to as the or else piece sometimes. Basically, and I understand that you had a pathways session on boundaries, and I think they're incredibly important for self-care. But at the end of each letter, people have the right to say, okay, you're not going to go. I get it. Here's what's going to happen now. And I'll share with you, let's see, I have this one here. So this is an example. James, I love you. I can't continue to stand by and watch you self-destruct. If you're unwilling to accept this help you're offering, you have to leave this home today. There will be no more money. Please go with Paul the Silverhand. So again, we start with love. Maybe we touch that person's heart and we get to yes. I promise you, I've been in interventions for 2 minutes. Sometimes we haven't even read a single letter, and a person says, okay, what do you want? Well, we'd like you to hear some letters. What do you want? We want you to go to treatment. Okay, let's go. So sometimes I'm a glorified Uber driver. Certainly we'll have these letters to be shared with the client, the IP at the treatment center, with the counselor. Most alcoholics walk around saying, leave me alone. I'm not hurting anybody. That was one of my battle cries. And what I can tell you is I was hurting a lot of people with my substance use disorder, people that I didn't even think knew, like my grandmother, my little sister. So it's really important to try in the beginning to touch the heart of the person. If that does not work, we try to appeal to their mind, to use logic. You've lost your job. We are now broke. The house is being foreclosed on. Really, this is the only way out, is for you to address your cocaine addiction at Mountainside or wherever. If the love and the logic do not work at the end of the meeting, and I'm saying the very end of the meeting, or if the person says, or what? Once in a while, a younger person will say, or what, or what, or what? I said, well, we'll talk about the or what later. No, 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 or what, or what? Okay, Susan, can you share your boundaries? Sometimes it comes out in the middle or the beginning, but mostly it's saved up to the end. And I'll tell you why. I've done interventions where we've gotten to yes, and then someone says, and I want to tell you, if you don't go to treatment, and then the person says, oh, you're going to be that way? Well, guess what? I'm not going to treatment. How about that? How about that? So we keep the or else piece to the very, very end. And this boundary statement is designed to reduce your enabling behavior and protect you from your loved one's untreated substance use disorder or mental illness. And we do, Paul said earlier, we do this process with mood disorders. We do this process with process addictions, gambling, sex addiction. I've done a lot of eating disorder interventions. And it's known mostly for drugs and alcohol, but certainly we have facilitated many meetings that were designed to communicate love and truth and a solution. So if we get to the end of the meeting, haven't gotten to yes, this statement is read. There might be one boundary statement, there might be two or three. Those are read to the person. At the completion of those boundary statements, I look at James and say, okay, with that information, are you willing to give this a go? I guess I don't have a choice. Okay, great. Let's get some stuff in a bag and off we go. Or sometimes just let's head to the car. People don't need to want to go to treatment in order to get well. It's a misconception. Doesn't work unless they want it. I'll tell you what doesn't work unless they want it. Alcoholics Anonymous does not work unless they want it. Treatment works perfectly well. It really does, most of the time. Most of the people I'm working with have a broken brain. It's either broken through the use of, or impaired through the use of dabs and wax and shatter and all these cannabis products, and the person is looking very psychotic or paranoid and delusional. Their brain is not working very well. Our responsibility as family members is to come in and get them help. If your father has Alzheimer's, you go and you take the car. It's a tough conversation, believe me. But I don't want my dad running over my neighbor kids, you know. So we go in there with love, kindness, and say, let's do this. The part I was trying to say is do you need to want it in order for it to work? The Hazelden group did an outcome study about 20 years ago now, comparing the rates of success or recidivism of groups that have walked in on their own and groups that were forced in. And guess what? Outcomes were exactly the same. So it doesn't matter why your loved one goes to rehab. They may go because they want to get the trust fund that's there in the bank. They may go out of whatever reason. Doesn't really matter, honestly. When they get there, they can begin to understand that they don't need to get high all day, every day, that there's another way. So if we can pluck someone out of the addictive cycle or the maelstrom of mental illness, get them in a safe place, give them food, shelter, medical care, love, kindness, a lot of people get better, really, truly. Um, the boundary piece is hard for some folks. And again, it's not imperative that you have one. It really isn't. I like it when people do change their behavior, because whether or not James goes into Silver Hill, you need some relief. You, mom, you, wife, uh, you, child, you need some relief. And my job is to offer you relief. The family is my client. The identified patient is not my client. They can love me, they can hate me. I don't care. I'm not there to build a therapeutic rapport with them. I am a therapist. I'm not there to be their therapist. I'm there to offer this family relief, to know that you've done something. If your son dies in 6 months' time, you're not going to be standing at his casket saying shoulda, coulda, woulda. I also tell lots of families this: your response moving forward from this day is call Paul. Call Paul, me. You have hired me to represent you in all things James. Well, all things James and his mental health. When he calls and says this, and this, I want to talk about that. Outpatient, I'll get drug tested. You can take away my car. Call Paul. When they end up at Greenwich Hospital, can you call Paul? I've gotten a lot of kids, adult kids, out of a lot of jail cells post intervention. I did one on a 83-year-old man in Rye, New York. His whole family set great boundaries at the end of this thing. The wife left and moved in with one of her sons up in Newtown. And you know what? The guy crashed his car the next day going to get booze. Well, why didn't he crash his car 2 weeks ago? Because the wife was buying him booze just to keep him happy or quiet or not in withdrawals. So when you dismantle the enabling system, and I don't just say stop doing it, I say, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go see this therapist, Bridget Usher in Trumbull. You're going to talk about what it's like to have a 35-year-old son who is running your life. We're going to get you to a group called Al-Anon. There's a group right up the street, Newtown Parent Connection. So I'm working on the family while the addict or alcoholic is out in the world doing their thing. And untreated addiction always gets worse. So we get another bite at the apple when they get arrested, or they lose their job, or Child Protective Services comes and takes the kids. I have a family I'm working with now. That's going to happen pretty soon. The kids are going to be, I think, given to the grandparents. When those kids are taken out of that home, that mom is going to get help. It's almost guaranteed. And those kids are going to be safe too, which is important. So let's see. I love what I do because people do get better. I really have seen it. I wouldn't be able to do this work for this long if it didn't work, honestly. I will speak to anyone anytime. You don't have to be ready to do this or do that. Sometimes a call with a guy like me can give you some hope and you can try 7 more things. I tell people, please ask your loved one to get help. Here's what I say, and someone may ask me this later. Well, Paul, we don't want to do an intervention quite yet. We want to talk to them. Do you have any suggestions? I say, I do. Here's what you do. You go home and you ask James 2 questions, one at a time. Here's the first one. James, do you feel as though you have a problem with substances? If James says yes, and only if he says yes, ask him the second question. Are you willing to get help for that problem today? If he says yes, you've just saved yourself a lot of pain, a lot of money, and get him in the car and go. If you haven't quite picked a treatment center yet, call me. We'll do some consulting and find a spot. We do that as well. But I don't want to sell someone a service that if they really are not in need of that service. Most of the time, you ask the first question, James, do you have a drug problem? The answer is no. And then I tell the person, leave or talk about the New York Yankees or the weather. Hammering on someone with a substance use problem or a mental illness is really not helpful. It really isn't. So I can tell you that we do a lot of stuff afterwards. We follow their care through treatment. We put a lot of people in treatment centers. We have frequent flyer status with some of these places, which means sometimes we can secure a discount for our families. Sometimes if there's a problem, I will call the executive director over at Cirque Lodge and say, hey, Britt, my gal Lisa has been there for a week and she hasn't been to the gym yet. She's asked 3 different counselors. She needs fitness and she hasn't gotten that. So what can we fix that? Certainly, Paul, whatever you need. I mean, I don't know how much money I put into Cirque Lodge's pocket last year, but it was significant. And they'll treat me well and they'll treat my clients well. So that's another advantage of hiring us. You get us either until the person goes to treatment, which could be a week, a month, 5 years, or the person dies, or we close the business. And the business is very robust right now and healthy. So when I say we'll do what it takes, I really mean it. So we stick with the family until the person goes to treatment. If they do go to treatment, we bring them to treatment and we do case management for the length of time that they are in treatment, meaning they do 40 days at Silver Hill, and then they go up to Portland, Maine to Foundation House for sober living for an additional 9 months. We are having weekly clinical updates with the staff at the facility. We're helping the family negotiate the things that you must when your loved one's in treatment. I do trainings on this with therapists, and I have I showed Paul maybe an 18 slide. I have a 42 slide one, but this isn't a training. This is a talk about what makes a successful intervention. And here's the answer: love and truth. So that's my talk. I'm very excited to hear questions, comments, whatever. Eric just raised his hand. So Paul, can we jump?
Do you want to first just do the unshare of the screen?
Oh, yes, I do want to do that. Stop share. Thank you. Perfect.
Great.
Went away. Will you, as the moderator, do you want to pick on people, or I guess I can do because I'm co-facilitating?
Yeah, you can do it. You can do it.
Eric, I would love to hear your question.
Hi, Paul. Thanks. It's
Hi.
nice to meet you and hear your story and what you're doing. I've actually met another person who does the same kind of work you do, so I'm familiar with some of the things you've said. My question is, you laid out a process that gets to a yes or no and then consequences, but as you've said, and the other guy I know, interventions sometimes take multiple times and takes days, weeks, months, years. You can't, I don't think, or maybe, how does that work? And how do those meetings change if it takes more than 1 or 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 months? What changes about the quality and the interaction of those successive intervention meetings?
We don't do successive intervention meetings. We do one meeting. At the end of that meeting, it's laid out on the table. and that offer will be there forever. Please go to treatment. There's a craft model of intervention that's more of a family therapy process. I don't do craft. I've been trained in it, but I don't find it to be very effective. So we only have one meeting, Eric. The thing that gets them into treatment is they fall down and split their head open, and then it's time. Other questions?
I guess I misunderstood the statement or the idea that this is a process that takes time. There is only one meeting, but you set some boundaries at the end of that meeting, and then you wait for the person to be ready. Is that essentially it? Yeah.
Okay. And the process, I wasn't clear. I apologize. The process is really more about how can we help you deal with the fact that your loved one is not accepting help. And most people I work with have tried yelling, bribing, whatever, 1,000 things. None of them have worked. So please stop doing them. Please. Let's try something else. Here's the other thing. Here's the something else I want you to try. Work on you. And I say to lots of families, do you have a therapist? Well, it's not about me. Oh, yes, it is. It's all about you. James doesn't want treatment today. We can't force him into treatment. This is all about you. You must, at some point, come to acceptance. And I'll tell you, you'll get there a lot quicker with Paul Reinhardt's help and with Bridget Usher, the therapist's help, and with lots of moms and dads at the Turnbridge support group. You'll get to a period of acceptance at some point. You really will. Or you'll go back to your codependency and attempts at control, and those don't work. So the process, the way I'm talking about it, is let's see who else in the group can get better while the addict gets worse. And whenever they're ready, all they have to say is, okay, I've flown out to Utah to get people. I had a kid call me not long ago from the New Haven train station at 3:30 in the morning. He had walked out of a hospital meeting. We did this intervention in the hospital, and we've done them in jails and hotels and mostly in people's homes. This kid left the hospital in a Johnny coat, no shoes, or had the thing, and then he had a pair of hospital scrubs. He left, he walked out of it. It was his third heroin overdose in 2 weeks' time. 2 of his heroin overdoses happened in the hospital. His mom took him to the hospital. Guess what? He had more heroin with him. He died again. They took him to another hospital. He had more heroin, or someone brought it to him. He had another overdose. Anyway, he left. He said, F you, no thank you, I'm not going. Give me my clothes. And his mom said, guess what? I mean, she was a little harsh. I wouldn't have suggested this, but she said, those are my clothes. So you want to go figure it out. He got all the way to New Haven, was hungry, cold, tired, scared, and called me. I got in my car. I brought him some clothes. We went and had some food somewhere up in New Haven. And I drove to JFK. And we got him on a plane to treatment, he and I. So that's more of what I mean by process. But certainly there are different approaches. And the one that some people like is called the craft model, which is more of a invitational model and more of a family therapy model. Good question. Who else? Oh, Valerie. Valerie.
Hey, Paul.
Hey.
Hi. I love this topic. I've been feeling like I've gone through I think as parents, we're all in a different stage of the problem. And for a while, I had behavioral issues with my son, but that settled down. But now it's like there's like nothing happening, like nothing, there's no treatment. And my son is known to like flee when he's confronted. So, and I realized that I'm not the only I'm not the person anymore that could really influence him changing. Like, I feel like, I heard that, like, the parent should be fired and let the interventionist take over because, we're not effective after a certain amount of time. And that's the point that I feel I'm at. But how do you handle the kid, or, that you may set this whole thing up and then they're just going to come in and flee and run off? Like, it's the same thing. You just have to wait.
How old is your son?
He's 19.
Okay. Does he live at home?
He lives at home. I've established terms and conditions, and I have gone the route of being ready to evict him if necessary. That took me a long time, but I did a lot of work inside. I've done craft. I've done a lot of work on me. And now it's like, okay, well, we're the status quo. I could let the status quo continue, but like you said in the beginning, you said, untreated addiction gets worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see it getting worse,
So I'll answer that question. Do you hide your purse?
Do I hide my purse? No.
You leave your wallet out on the kitchen table with no fear of any money going missing?
No, he doesn't anymore. Nope. He used to a little bit, not much. No, but I don't fear that anymore.
Okay. So I generally try to get a sense of how bad is it?
That's okay.
For you, not for him. It is whatever it is. But I talk to moms who lock their door for fear that their son will hit them in the head with an axe at night.
I'm not there. Yeah.
Or a lot of them hide their wallet. They lock stuff up. They don't go on vacation. They talk like this. They can't live in their home. It's a hostage situation. I'm not saying you're in that right now.
Okay.
Because it's sometimes it's little, sometimes it's huge. But when I talk to a family that are held hostage, like the family who the son has a thermostat in his part of the house. He's taken over part of the house. He cranks the heat up to 95 so his family sweats, his whole family. And he does all these things. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is a 19-year-old kid who's running a house. I mean, really, his sister can't really study because it's always crazy. His dad likes to be on business trips because it's easier. And the whole house is upside down. Mm-hmm. When I see that and hear that, we're going to go, and if people hire me, we're going to go and have the meeting. And if James runs out the door, I'll run out after him. I don't run as much as I used to, but I'll walk out after him and say, James, please give us 10 minutes. We're going to have a short family meeting. No tricks, no handcuffs. Please F you, I'm out of here. Please just give us a couple of minutes. No. Okay, James, I've been instructed to communicate the following. And he's walking down the sidewalk, and I'm walking behind him. James, if you do not accept the help that your family is offering, they've told me to tell you, get your gear and get out. You can't live there anymore. There's no more car. They're not going to send you back to college. And your dad's going to press charges with the New Canaan police for the theft that you had. So come back. We'll talk about it. Really, we'll get this all worked out. I promise. And the guy says, nope. I've heard that before. It's a bluff. It's never going to happen. Go F yourself. And they get picked up in a couple of days because there's a warrant out for their arrest for felony larceny. And then it's really much easier to get someone into treatment. I sometimes go to the arraignment. Your Honor, can I ask that we have treatment as that's sentencing as an alternative to incarceration? Sometimes I can use the legal system to get someone into treatment. So, yeah,
that really puts the right perspective. Like when you say it that way, I think I don't need an intervention per se yet.
Probably not.
Yeah,
And
I think I'm doing good right now because my terms and conditions are being followed.
good. That's great.
And I think that I should just then say, just be happy with that for now.
Listen, if you're not hiding your wallet, if you're not frightened that he's going to burn the house down.
No, he's actually paying me rent now, so that's good.
Awesome. So look, your kid, I don't know how I won't do an assessment or evaluation on him, but if status quo is working for you, stick with status quo.
Okay.
At some point, he may wake up and say, boy, it's really tough. All my friends are graduating or going to college. I'm here in town and doing nothing again. I'm a loser. You know, if you feel like a loser, sometimes you're open to maybe some counseling, a little counseling.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll keep my hand on the pulse of how it's going. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. That was a great question. Thank you. Other questions about the process or treatment or?
Let's see.
Hi, Susan. Reverend Susan. I see some friends on here. Thank
Chris, do you have a question?
I just unmuted to say hello.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Hi there, I'm Chris. I do have a question. We have a 29-year-old son. He lives on his own. He doesn't live with us. We've actually, on occasion gone to his apartment, knocked on the door, and he refuses to open the door. How do you have an intervention? Like, I just don't see any circumstance in which we could get him to get to the intervention. How do you finagle those kind of situations?
We go to the house. You knock on the door. He says, I'm not coming out. I say, just what's his first name?
Christopher.
Christopher. Christopher, can you give us a couple minutes? We just want to have a short family meeting. Nope. If I am really frightened, I don't use it as a trick or a strategy, but if I'm worried about him, I have a right, you have a right, we all have a right to ask for a welfare check. A lot of times in our families, we're afraid of, I'm not saying you are, but some people are afraid about the neighbors. What are the neighbors going to think? When I sometimes call for a welfare check, there will be 6 police, there'll be maybe 8 firemen, some EMTs. They will come to the door and they will ask Christopher if he's okay. Kids don't want that. They really don't. But let's say he thinks it's a bluff. So bunch of cops show up, EMTs, ambulance, the whole thing. And they're all standing around. And I meet them on the front at the sidewalk and say, we've got a young man and this is the situation. There are no weapons involved, but everyone's really worried about him. Can we see if he's okay? Sometimes the cops stand around while we read our letters. You can't, I don't know if you have any leverage at all, but if you do, you can turn that off, turn off the money or the this or that as a one of the boundaries and consequences. I get in to see these people. I get into apartments in New York City. I get into all sorts of different places because I want these people to hear that they're loved and folks are worried about them. Once in a great while, we can't get in. We put the letters, we try to maybe do it by phone. We then put the letters on the front step and the boundaries are shared with that person. Hey, son, love you. But here's the deal. This is really, really painful for us. So if you won't even meet with us, here's what we got to do. Please don't call us anymore. It's not working. Honestly, our love isn't sufficient. We can't have you over the house. I don't want you at any of our family gatherings. It seems like most of the time that you show up, it turns into a real problem. So Here's our boundaries. And here's this guy, Paul, the guy that was trying to get into your house. Give him a call. You know, once in a while, these people call me and we have a coffee. And I say, hey, why was I called by your parents? Oh, they think that I'm this, and well, let's talk about it. I've had people after the intervention agree to sit down with me and do an evaluation, an assessment, a pencil and paper, SASE, or I got about 9 different things I can do with people. I've had folks after the intervention, their friends take them and bring them back to me or call me and say, he's ready. I had a drug dealer get his customer into treatment. So I'm offering you a different course of action. We're going to get him into treatment. I don't know. I would like to, but you can certainly change the way that you're acting towards your son and see if that gives you some relief. People say this too. I want to say, I don't want to screw up my relationship with my son. It's like, it's a crumb. It's a little tiny bit. I don't want to foul that up. I'll take his call at 3 a.m. while he's drunk. I don't care. He can come over here and make a big gigantic mess. I just want to see him. And I say, does that work for you? Do you deserve a crumb? Is a crumb fulfilling your heart? Is it a real relationship? People with substance use disorders do not have connections. You cannot love, well, I shouldn't say that. People with substance use disorders need connection. They don't have it. Every single person I've worked with is in a great deal of pain. I have a great deal of compassion, I promise you. My new mantra, I don't know how new, but is to be kind. 30 years ago, I mean, I never kicked a door in, but I'm ashamed at some of the things I've said to some of the addicts, like, man up. Oof, what a terrible thing to say to somebody. Yeah, so I try to be compassionate and kind and understand this person's honestly doing the best they can. It's not working, and it's killing them, and it's killing their family. So those are some of my thoughts on this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I see Valerie might have another question, but first, why don't I ask Ava, do you have a question?
Yeah. I wanted to ask if you're ever in sort of situations where you're dealing with the family and not, it's like some of the families, like up to, like they're all on the same page and they're all wanting to move forward, but a lot of them aren't. How do you approach people who are hesitant to put the person into recovery?
That's a great question. If we have, let me say it this way. You don't need your sister's permission to do an intervention on your dad. You don't need your mom's permission, let's say. If you want to take action, it's better if there are a couple of you. But the people that aren't quite ready to do an intervention, there are 2 ways. Let them try to get ready over time. Maybe expose them to the things that we've spoken of around codependency and around family recovery stuff, and see if they'll change, or do it with the few people that you have, or don't do it at all. I know that's kind of a lousy answer to that one, but yeah, I don't sell people on intervention. I'll explain what it is. A lot of people have misconceptions because they've seen it on The Sopranos and all these different things. So I'll have a pre meeting, conference call or a Zoom meeting, and see how many people out of these 9 are on the same page. Well, we got 7 people that want to do it. the drug addict brother won't be part of it, and the elderly father won't be part of it. That's okay. We don't
Okay.
need every single person.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, Valerie, you wanted to say more? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just had one question. When I think about the whole intervention and doing this, it provides someone that has a lot of, just mental, anxieties. It's like you're exposing everything. And there's something about like worsening that's in my head. It's like worsening their despair, making it worse for them.
Yes.
And then, what could you say about that? Like, I know that's a big factor, is like,
Yeah.
are you making matters worse?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make matters worse.
Okay.
We really are. We're trying to shake up the system. So many families don't want to upset their loved one. The kid is psychotic, right? He says there's a camera in the dog. So everyone's like, there's
Okay.
So but I also, there's another way to answer this question too. I don't on purpose make people upset, but the fact is, this woman I worked with the other day is a terrible mom. She's neglectful. The house is, I'm not condemned, but it was really one of the worst houses I've ever been in.
Wow.
$1 million home, and it was crazy. And we weren't gonna play the game that her husband's affair was the real thing that we need to talk about. What we need to talk about is this woman's on methamphetamine. She believes someone has switched her car with a fake car. She believes her children's arms and legs aren't their own, but they're robotic.
Mm.
And we have to go in there and speak the truth. I won't say to her, ma'am, you're a bad mom, but I will say, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. We were trained to not say any of that. Like, unless you have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. Or God forbid I upset her, she'll take my head off. Or what if she goes and does more drugs? What if she kills herself? So at the end of an intervention where I don't walk out with the person, here's the question. I say, James, are you feeling like hurting yourself?
Mm.
If he says yes, I kind of sneak into the kitchen and dial 911.
Yeah.
And we get him up to Greenwich Hospital. After he's 72 hours, maybe he's off crack cocaine long enough that he starts to clear. Maybe they've given him some antipsychotics. He begins to become more human. His brain maybe works a little bit better. And then we go from locked psychiatric unit to Mountainside or High Watch or whatever. But in 37 years, one person killed themselves after 4 months of mental health care. She left and stepped in front of a train. But that was not after the intervention. I've walked into houses and found dead people, the identified patient dead twice.
Wow.
I've had guns pulled on me. I've been punched. But my job is to speak the truth. My job is to help you speak the truth. And we're not going to mince words. We're going to say it with kindness and love and those nice things. But
Thank you.
mad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speak
Thank
the truth.
you.
You're welcome. That's a piece too, man. I'm giving families this whole opposite paradigm. Like, we've been trying to protect him from arrest. We've been trying to, guess what? We're going to do it a whole different way now. Okay. You're going to offer a reasonable course of action called Silver Hill Hospital. You're going to say, now this is how it's going to be between you and us, son, you and me. And this guy over here, whether you like him or not, is a really smart guy. And I can help the son find housing. I can help the kid get on food stamps, get a bus pass. When I'm in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I say to a 19-year-old boy, I can help you get food stamps and a bus pass, they blanch. I mean, a lot of the people I've worked with haven't heard the word no very often. And listen, I'm not saying it's your fault, if any of you parents on this phone. I've spoiled my kids because I love them and I want them to be happy and successful. And I've done too much for them sometimes. But we're going to walk in there and say, this is what you need, in my opinion. Actually, if you need it or you don't need it, these are the conditions for my continued financial support. You go and get an assessment and evaluation. You know, go do drugs. It's cool. We're not trying to make them stop doing drugs. Go do drugs, but not here. You can't do drugs in my house anymore. I'm not talking about you, but I'm saying another family says that. And listen, proximity does not equal safety. I've had many parents say, well, at least he's home. I don't know how many on this Zoom. I know Paul's been to more than one funeral, and I've been to a bunch. Proximity does not mean they're safe, because they're in their childhood bedroom shooting heroin rather than under a bridge. They're going to die up there, not out there. And if every penny that they get, steal, borrow, make, whatever, goes towards their addiction because you're buying them food and soap and cars and phones, and here, spend my money on the real stuff, and you could spend your money on the drugs. I say, listen, man, let them go get an apartment. If they have money after they buy their food and their rent and their gas and their insurance, God bless them. Go drink, go do drugs, whatever you want, but not in my home. Another minute. I'm done.
Paul, I just wanted to follow up on the critical mass question. So how many people is the ideal amount of people for doing an intervention? You said 1 to 7. Is it like 4 to 6? And do you really have critical mass if there's only 1 or 2?
Yeah, it's not. Thank you, Paul. It's not the number. It's really the strength of the message and the commitment that one other person has. I mean, I've done. A husband is intervening on the wife. The kids are minor children. They're not involved. Everyone else is dead, or they live in Australia, and they don't think that their sister, daughter is in fact indeed an alcoholic. So I'm not going to wait till the tennis girls show up and say she's an alcoholic. I'm going to say, are you sure? And he says, yeah, this, and this. And say, what do you want to do? I want her to get well. I love her. Cool. That's enough. One person's enough. And then I sometimes screw it up by saying, are you willing to set boundaries? And they say, oh, what's that? And then they don't hire me because they don't want to set boundaries. But minor kids are a whole different thing. The kids deserve nurturing and a stable home.
All right. Well, it's just about an hour. Does anybody else have one final question before we go?
Listen, I will pick up my phone 24 hours. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm trying to have boundaries now. I hate that. I've said this for years. Lynn has heard me say it. I pick up my phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's sad, isn't it? You can call me anytime. If you want to chat later, I'm going to go spend time with my family now. But if you want to talk tomorrow and have a question, Paul has all my contact detail. Yeah. And I love what I do. I love seeing people get well. And I mean the families. And look, I went to the Karen Gala a couple of years ago. There were 5 sets of parents that came up and hugged me and cried, and their kids were, I think 4 of them were still sober, different lengths of time. I have cards. I have cards on my desk right here. Hey, Paul, just celebrated 23 years of sobriety. I remember the day you walked into my house. I hated you. A lot of them hate me that day. But I got a whole bunch of cards from people that are a year sober, up to, there's a guy in Cape Cod that is 35 years sober, and I was involved in his intervention. So we'll talk anytime. I'm really grateful, Paul, for you setting this up. And please, no matter what you do, intervention, not intervention, find other humans that you can connect with. This whole deal is about love. You need love, you need kindness, you need support. Ready? You are not alone. Okay. So thank you for listening. And anytime
Yeah.
you guys ever want to talk, I'm here.
Well, thank you, Paul. This has been very, very good. I really appreciate it. Paul, thank you.